Hello and welcome to the Kickoff video for part of the manage stage for 14.1. Today, Larissa and I will talk about what the optimize group as well as the import group are planning for the 14.1 release. Sam and Orit will do separate videos for compliance and access. So with that said, Larissa, would you take it with optimize?
I will. Going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. The first thing that we have coming up is we are going to be adding more GitLab features into the DevOps adoption table. And in 14.1, we're going to be focusing on security scanning features. A lot of this will be back-end work. Recently, we added this dev, sec, and ops grouping to the DevOps adoption table. So we'll be doing the back-end work to be adding a lot more features into this security view of the adoption table. Specifically, we'll be adding SAST and DAST and dependency scanning and vulnerability detection scanning. So once the backend work is done for that, you will be able to use the API to get information on which teams in your organization have enabled those security scans in their projects. Additionally, we'll be doing the front end work to add SAST and DAST into the UI in this table under the sec section. So in addition to, well, actually, instead of just having this scanning column, which currently just detects whether you've got any kind of scan enabled, we'll be getting more specific about which scans have been enabled. Next up, we'll be adding a view like this to the adoption table. So this section at the top here that shows out of the number of features that are available in the DevOps adoption table, how many of those features have your groups adopted. So this is the first iteration we're making to give you a better sense of the maturity of adoption of your DevOps processes. Then we will be doing some improvements to value stream analytics. So for value stream analytics, we have value stream analytics available both at the project level and the group level. They both actually use different code bases, and so the user experience, the UI, is a little bit different between the two. We are merging those together, and the next iteration we're making on that is to add, sorry, I've gone out of order here. I'll come back to the order in a minute. So we will be adding a filter bar. In the group view, you see you have this filter option here, and that's not available in the project view. So we'll be adding filtering to the project view so you can be a lot more specific about the data that you're getting returned for your value stream. Also, when you're in a stage, so let's say I'm in the code stage in the project view, the data down here is not actually part of a table, so there's no ability to sort the data. In group value stream analytics, we did implement a table and the ability to sort. So you can actually sort based on time so that you can see, for example, in the code stage, which issues have spent the most amount of time in the code stage or the least amount of time in the code stage. So in 14.1, we'll be converting this stage view to a table so that we can support sorting. Okay, I'm going to go back to the one that I skipped over, which is in the group view for value stream analytics, you have the ability to select projects. So you can narrow down the issues that you're seeing here to specific projects. But this user interface is a little bit confusing. So if I search for a project here, for example, and I pick this project, then the drop-down closes. And so we've found that users think you can only filter by one project. In reality, you can filter by multiple projects, but it's just not a very intuitive interface. So we're going to be making some improvements to that drop down so it's more obvious that you can choose multiple projects to filter by. And finally, we're going to be doing some ongoing background work to change how this date selector gets applied in value stream analytics. Today, if I filter by these dates, it's going to show me, it's going to apply that date filter to the date that an issue was created. So the set of data that I see here within my stage will only be the data that for issues that were created in that date range. So for example, if I select March, I'm only seeing issues that were created in March rather than issues that move through the code stage in March. We've done some customer interviews and we believe that it's more useful to be able to see which items move through that stage in the selected date range. It's going to take quite a bit of back-end work to make this change because of some database changes we have to make to support it. But we have a great proposal that Adam has been working on. We'll be refining that proposal in 14.1 and doing a proof of concept and potentially even starting work on those changes. That's all I have, Harris. Over to you. I see you have some questions.
Yeah, I've been typing away. Sorry. I really like a lot of what's happening, and I'm glad that you're making so much progress on this. So I had a question when you were showing the choice between the DevSec and Ops for the adoption, and you were talking about adding the SaaS and DaaS, and I was wondering if that would just kind of bring it up to par with what we already have in Dev and Ops, and then the next view that you showed looked like that's exactly what happened. So
Yeah.
Sec was just really kind of lagging behind the other three, and when you showed all three, it made sense that you would have like, you know, those 3 bullet points. I really love that view because it makes it simple. It makes it also kind of almost balanced. It's like, okay, you should check out, these are the 3 most important things. Clearly, it's not all that you can do.
Right.
But,
exactly.
you know, these are the 3 most important things you should check for each one of the stages. So I definitely thought that was cool.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Ops and Dev have a lot more features added in those views. Sec is very sparse. So we'll be bringing it up to par in that there are more features being displayed for the Sec grouping.
Awesome. So looking at the new filter that you were working on for the groups, it looked like you had the ability to look at the VSA by milestone, which is really going to help me a lot because we use milestones kind of as a stand-in for iterations. So we never switch the iterations. So I'd be able to see kind of the, you know, the progression and you know, how things move across by milestone. But I'm curious for our users who might be using iteration as iteration. Will that filter include the iteration there as well?
That's a great point. We haven't added it yet because iteration is a newer feature in GitLab, but I think that's a great point that we should create an issue if we don't have one already to add iterations.
Cool. And then the new project filter selection, and there are several interactions that really cause me trouble in GitLab, and most of them are typically, you know, a kind of a type ahead search among many things. So like finding an epic to associate with an issue. Finding maybe an epic or an issue to, well, let's say an epic to associate with a filter. Like those are, really painful. So if you come up with a better way, an easier way to search for those, especially if you look for something like GitLab, because it looks through all the descriptions as well. So even if there is no word GitLab in the epic name, it will still find things. So if you come up with a better way, I'd like to see if there's a way to like advertise this and maybe, use that component, like create a great component and use that component elsewhere. I'm really a strong believer in creating good components as opposed to like recreating the same solution in all the pages.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I know that the team has been looking at different ways that we can optimize how that search works. So I'd be happy to share that with you.
Yeah. And I haven't seen kind of any visual cues in the from and to date that kind of tell me one way or the other what those dates are. So I was wondering maybe if it would make sense to just add, popover is great. Other visual cues, maybe, I don't know if the from and the to, maybe the start and end or creation date or some other words that we might use that it may give me more of a clue what those dates really represent. So I think that's a great step to have that popover. I didn't see that.
Yeah, we just added this popover in the last release, I think it was, because you're right, it didn't say what these date ranges apply to, how they're filtering the data. So we added this line here showing data for workflow items created in this date range. But I think we could do even better to, instead of having it in a popover, have it even more obvious.
Right. And given that we're actually changing the meaning of this, maybe a slight treatment change or change of words might also be a clue to people to even look into what these dates are, because they may just assume they're going to keep working the same way if we use the same look and feel.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that when we make that change, that's a great opportunity to also make a UI change there.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And if there's nothing else to share and optimize, I'll take it from here and talk about import. So let me share my view. So what I have, kind of as a most important directional item is the continuation of the delivery of the GitLab migration feature. And if I scroll down just a little further, you'll see that there were a lot more X's in like what's missing from the ability to have all the details about an epics migrate across with the group. So we have checked off numbers 5, 6, and 7, but we have added number 8. Once that's completed, we will be able to fully check off the migration of epics as part of the GitLab migration feature. So I'm really excited about that one. It's been long coming, and we're seeing the end here. Past that, we will continue working on the parity with the old feature, which is the group export and import that uses files. So we should be a couple milestones away from completing that, at which point we're going to be able to deprecate the group export import feature and create even more focus around this new functionality. So that's all exciting things coming down the pipe. Next up are some of the features that are still related to the group migration, which is also known as bulk import in the code. So sometimes some of those words actually that do seep through into the issues, but I'll make sure that they don't get into any kind of a marketing or release notes. So the one thing that we've been looking at from the front end perspective is the ability to select more than one group for bulk import or for the group migration. So in particular, having the kind of the checkboxes on the side of the table, and then being able to select one or many of these. And once they're selected, once you select one or many, be able to do an import on only the things that were selected. Up until now, we have had individual imports. So each one of these lines had kind of an import button on it. And you would have to press all of those imports for each one of the lines that you want if you wanted the individual. Or the other choice was import all button. This is the one that says import selected right now, was import all, which means it would import everything on the page. But if I just needed to import all but a few, there would be a lot of clicks to kick off all of those imports. So that's the interaction we're looking for, and we'll be moving that interaction into the other importers once we get the group migration to use this interaction. But even more importantly, we would like to actually go ahead and start a new component that I hope to be able to, I hope that other groups and other PMs will be able to utilize in what they're doing. And the component is something of an enterprise table component. We have a lot of the needs for lists that are more than just lists. They're really tables. They have columns. We want column sorting on each one of those columns. We want to be able to maybe even rearrange the columns. We want to be able to do this multi-select and a bulk action. All of those are common across a lot of different views, but each one of those views has a different implementation of that, because it's really just a list with some added features. Some have pagination, some have column sorting, like what I've just seen you do in the VSA table. So I really wanted to get a new component going that we can all contribute to, that would have all of these features as options that we can utilize across a lot of different views. So, for anyone who's watching and who's interested in contributing to this, please let me know. Please let Ilya know. He is the front-end developer who is going to be running with this. We'll start it off by just creating, the table that has the one feature that we need, but we're going to want to maybe invest and expand that, as opposed to, coming up with, a lot of different ways to solve the same problem. So this is kind of a call to action for everyone as well. And Larissa, I'd like to talk to you as well about that VSA table and see if we can maybe combine the efforts to where you may be able to get, either the pagination or, just like some of the things that we've implemented in our table, and we get the pretty column sorting.
Yeah, that's a great, I actually just added that to the agenda. You mentioned rearranging columns. I think
Right.
that would be a very useful thing to have in the DevOps adoption table. So yeah, I'd love to collaborate with you on that.
Yeah, and even an expandable table to where maybe each one of these items does have sub items. So there are a lot of views where that makes sense if you're looking at epics, and those epics have sub epics and potentially potentially issues underneath. So I definitely see this enterprise table as something that we could utilize across a lot of different features.
We've been talking about the expansion as well, because in the DevOps adoption table, we show groups, and it would be interesting to expand those out and see subgroups within the groups, or projects
Right.
within the groups.
Right, and we have the same thing here, because this actually shows groups, like this is importing groups. So the groups will have subgroups, and right now we can just select the top level groups, and you just kind of select the top level group, and then everything underneath gets migrated. But there's no ability to just pick and choose which one of the subgroups you may want to migrate. So that would give us that.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. Next up is allowing groups to be re-imported. So the one thing that we have a lot of need for is for a group, once it's imported right now, it does tell you that it was already imported and gives you a link to where it got imported to. But in case that you want to run another import a week later, because it was just kind of a test import and now you want to do it for real, and you want to import it again, you should be able to rerun or re-import a group. And right now that's not even possible without you deleting the group that's already there, or renaming the source. So there's kind of a, creating a mismatch between the source and destination. So we want this to be a first-class experience and have someone be able to see that this group was already imported, but then choose to import it again to a different location. So we're going to be looking to do that in 14.1. Next one is something that we've tried something and didn't work and came back. So we have originally found an issue to where if there is no .git in the URL and it is required, like it exists out there, we are unable to do the import. So we kind of had to require the users to put the .git in the URL in order to avoid those just mistakes like typos or just not even thinking about the fact that you need to really add a .git if the URL requires it. So we made this a requirement, and it turns out there's a type of Git server that has the opposite problem, which is it does not allow the .git extension on their Git servers. So we have pretty much disabled the ability for those people to do imports. So we're finding a compromise in the middle, which is show a warning. So in most cases, omitting the .git will cause you a failed import. But for those cases where it doesn't, we'll just kind of let you know that, hey, you have not put the .git in the URL. Check it, and if you want to proceed, go ahead and proceed. So this is a second attempt on this. Finally, the one thing that we don't currently have in the group export import, so the current feature set for migrating groups does not allow for migrating users. So you're supposed to get your users migrated ahead of the import manually or however you want to do it by engaging professional services. But all that needs to be, like all those users kind of need to be already in the destination before you attempt an import. If you don't, then all of the objects that get transported, that get migrated, such as epics and anything else, will get associated with the importer user. So the importer user will look like the creator of all the epics, creator of all the comments, because we have no user to match it with. So the big enhancement once we reach the parity with the current export import is to start including the users in the migration and really have a full migration of a group that includes users from one instance of GitLab to another. This is something that has not been solved before. We have run into several roadblocks prior to this by just exploring this area, just even matching, because using emails to match, which is the most logical or probably the best way to match the two users between the two systems, is a potential security issue, because if the users have made those emails private, we should not be exposing those in files or in network traffic. So there's a lot of discovery that needs to be done before we even understand what is feasible technically, what are the couple different ways we could do this, and what are the pros and cons of each one of the approaches. So in 14.1, we're going to spike this out. We're going to look for some of those answers. We're going to try to find ways to satisfy the requirement without kind of exposing any of the user's private data in those transactions. So this spike is going to be really important, and it will then inform our backlog as far as how we're going to approach the user's migration in the future. So those are all the things that I had to talk about. And Larissa, you had a few comments and questions?
Yeah, really exciting to see the progress that you've made on the group import. I know you've been working on that epic for a long time, and it looks like you're really close to finishing that out. That's going to feel good. I really liked the multi-group selector. That looks like a huge time saver for users. And then a question about the user import that you're going to be investigating, will that also track user membership to groups?
Yes.
Ah, great.
So that will be important. The users would probably be migrated first, and then we would migrate the groups. And then as the groups are getting migrated, we would associate the users with the groups. That's what we currently do with epics. So if the users exist already, so right now we kind of have to assume that the users already exist. We don't do that part. But if the users exist in a destination, when we migrate an epic, we will look up that user. And if we find that user, we will associate that user as a creator, as a commenter. So we'll find all the right users in the destination and associate them with each one of the areas where there's a user association on an epic. So for groups as well, we will look to transplant that membership as well.
Very nice.
It should be like a one click,
yeah,
and the same group that I have over here is over here, and you shouldn't have to like do right.
Yeah. And then just a general question that came up today in a conversation. When we are so in the DevOps adoption table, you manually add groups into that table to view feature adoption information. And so that's fine if you just want to, if you're already set up using the adoption table and you just want to add one or two groups. But if you're going in there for the first time and setting up a new view and you have 1,000 groups, I think we're really going to need a way to do some kind of bulk import of groups into that table. And so I was just curious, I think there are probably ways we could do it through the API, but I was also curious if there's some import function.
Well, I would say maybe it might make sense to take a look at the group migration UI.
Okay.
Like looking at that view, and I'll try to pull it up and see if I can actually find that. So let's see if, so right now, this is the view. We're adding those checkboxes on the left. We have the pagination, which also lets you choose the page size. And we have a search that searches the name, for, clearly it's not going to do anything here, but maybe. No. So, the search that searches. So, this is the ability for you to take a look at all the groups available there, narrow it down by searching for a substring, but then also letting them select from the choices, like in a multi-select kind of a fashion. So that may be a way to go about that as well. And then if I were to, and then there's a button that says import all. The problem here is I've already completed these two imports and I can't import anymore. So that is disabled. But I feel like a similar interaction would be needed, and you might be able to use the same APIs that this UI uses, because this UI really discovers what are all the groups available and how do I show them to the user in a way that they could search, narrow down, paginate, and then select a few things or select all. So not sure if it's great help, but it's some starting point. Maybe.
Yeah, well, it would be nice to have consistency
right.
with the user experience. Is this at an instance level, or if I was already inside a group, would the API have awareness of the subgroups in a group?
So this is an instance level because we are actually connecting to a remote instance of GitLab.
Right. Okay.
So this connection here is to a remote instance of GitLab. So we're connecting to an instance and talking to the instance and saying, please send us all the groups that you have that that this user has access to migrate over.
Yeah.
And then we get a list of top level groups from the other instance.
Okay, great.
And I mean, other instance, or you can just query yourself. Like, the instance can query the same query itself and then find that out. But it is the full instance, and it is related to what the user can see.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. So I would say that concludes the kickoff for optimize and import. Thank you for watching, and Larissa, it's been a pleasure. Bye.